All right. Who wants to start introducing themselves? We didn't say that.
I can take it. My name's Matthew, and I am currently located in Lund. I am part of Life.Examined here.
My name is Joshua Bronson, and I am also part of Life.Examined, and I am in Gothenburg.
And my name is Miriam, and I am also in Gothenburg.
Nice. And Life.Examined is all about helping people improve their lives by deepening and awakening their philosophical ethos. And philosophical ethos is just the way in which their character, the decisions flow out of their philosophical ideas. And then those are just ideas that relate to philosophical issues. And our long-term vision is that we want to see a world where people take it for granted that philosophical practice is an essential part of their well-being and of the well-being of society. So that's what we're all about. But today we're going to demonstrate that with a thought experiment. So Miriam, tell us what we're going to do.
And a few cups of coffee.
Yes.
Philosophy goes well with coffee. So we're using today a thought experiment that is designed to help you find your values. And it goes like this. What would you do? It's quite simple. What would you do if you had 100 million in the bank? That's just to say, if you had no money concerns whatsoever, if you could do anything. So the answer is not, I would quit working. That's like a negative statement, but a positive one. What would you do? So what would we do? What would Life.Examined do if we had 100 million in the bank?
Good. So we're turning it in on Life.Examined as a group. So what would we do as a group, not us individually per se?
No, we can do that another time.
Sure.
I do it all the time. I love the experiment. What would I do? So what would Life.Examined do? So we'll take turns and talking, and we'll help each other think out loud and sort of process our own thoughts by asking like open, nice questions.
I mean, can I connect this back to what you said in the beginning? So, I mean, it seems interesting that the purpose of this is to try and tease out our values. So what is it that we are valuing when we try to walk through this thought experiment? What is it that's important for us? Yeah. I'm assuming that's what we're going to be shooting for.
Yeah, what's important for us? What do we want to do? What do we mean when we say philosophical ethos and things like that? You know? It's so easy that it just becomes a lot of words.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what would we do with 100 million? Okay, so I'll just say some things and then we'll see where that goes. I actually didn't prepare this very much because I didn't want to be reading.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, and I figured the whole idea is that we should help each other think.
Yeah,
right.
The thinking
Philosophy
together.
On the fly, improvisation here.
Yeah, yeah. So with 100 million, we could help a lot of people. We could take them on a cruise. We could take the whole world on a cruise.
Well, the whole world, maybe not. There's a lot of people in the world.
I mean, the philosophically inclined part, English speaking.
Yeah. There's only about 10 people there, so.
We could go forever, 40-year cruise.
Yep.
But that's, okay, so then we could do one thing. But, okay, so we want to help some people. We want to help people, but how do we want to help them? We can give, if we have a lot of money, we can give things for free, but only until the money's gone. So it's not like
right.
I'm stuck already. What would
I do?
So,
I mean, can I jump in here? I mean, so this is, I think, seems to be important that you're thinking in terms of sustainability. If we have money, I mean, we're not talking about infinite amount of money, but we've got to do something with it in Life.Examined that's sustainable. We're not going to go out and buy 5 Ferraris, drive them around town, get some free advertising with that, and then that'll be it. Like, we need some sort of vision that's sustainable, right? I think there's a value in sustainability that is important for what you would do with the money.
Sustainability. That's like one value already.
Yeah, it is. Well, actually, it's a good value. It's a way of thinking about that we want the organization to continue. So we want Life.Examined to continue. We don't want to burn it all up in a couple years. I mean, you could go through $100 million, I suppose, right? I mean, like Matt said, you could buy everybody Teslas and just buy houses. I mean, you know, right? So you could use the money unwisely, but we want to use it wisely in order to continue reaching the goal that we have for Life Examined. And so if our goal is to both help people, but it's also to improve their philosophical ethos, right? So we want to we'll use that money in ways that is most effective to meet that end.
But here's what's interesting. I mean, and you're talking about this. Yeah. We're not talking about Life Examined for the sake of Life Examined. I mean, one of the problems with organizations is after a while, organizations lose the vision, and the purpose of the organization is to keep itself going. And I think Miriam, you said it really well. I mean, the vision, I think, is to help people. However that looks, we can talk about that a bit more. But it's easy, I think, when you have resources as an organization, is to just try to have the organization survive. But that doesn't seem to be the goal that we have. I mean, of course, it's the survival of the organization is a means to an end, but a different kind of end.
That's really good. So we don't want just to like a bureaucratic process, right?
Right.
we make events. We do things that bring people in to have discussions. Maybe we could do larger events if we had so much money. We could make them cheaper for people to come to, maybe, or we could make different products and so on. But we could set up these systems. And if we only thought that the money was allowing the systems to continue more effectively and larger without thinking about what the goal of the systems was, then we would just be continuing a bureaucratic process, right? We'd just be building it larger, more complex, and it would be doing more things, but we wouldn't, and it would just continue on with inertia. It would just continue moving, but we don't want to just continue moving in a certain direction just because we're going in that direction.
No.
Another thing we could do is we could employ people. We could give ourselves excellent salaries and employ other people to also sort of spread philosophy as a way of life. So what would we require of them? With like some kind of similar values, right? And then some kind of education. So we want Life Examined to be about education, like the kind of life education.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually, let me jump in on that, because when I received this question, and I haven't prepared a whole lot, so it's kind of improvising here, but I've thought a lot about sort of the human resources part of this. I mean, Life Examined is something that we can't really automate. I mean, we can't do examination of life with the purpose of helping ourselves and others to ask important existential questions in a way that help us live better. We can't have automation or robots do that. So I think it's really important that a central part of the vision is to create a network of people who are willing to engage with these questions and to carry on this vision. And then in this way to go out and to meet people. I mean, it's very interesting how there's been a sort of kickback in our digital society towards more and more towards analog, towards face-to-face interaction. I say that kind of goofy when we're sitting here on Skype doing this, right? But still, I mean, this is because of our limitations. But there is something fantastic about getting together in a group of people face-to-face with this is analog, embodied interaction. And I think that's something to build upon, is to create a group of people who actually get together, meet together, engage with each other, brainstorm. That would be, I think, a really good way to use 100 million in building up that kind of human network. So
can I enter in there? Because I think I mean, our tagline, right, is Life Examined, live interactive philosophy. So our aim is to do live interactive events. It's exactly what you just said, Matt, to bring people together, because in that interaction, in the dialogue, there's something really important that happens, and it's hard to have spaces for that to transpire. But with resources, you can use tools that facilitate that in much better ways. So, for example, with YouTube videos, with maybe better quality YouTube videos, like better cameras and so on. Right? I mean, like there's all kinds of ways that you could facilitate that in a much better way, which allows more people to enter into it. Like you said, Miriam, employing people. People are expensive, right? But if you're going to do good events, you need people involved. You need to be able to pay people. You need to be able to bring people in, and you know, we could grow the events and make them so much more interactive and exciting the more resources we had. So $100 million would be fantastic.
But if so let's say we take we have $100 million.
Yeah.
So we book the entire the greatest stadium that we have.
Yeah.
And then we have very good microphones so that our voices can, I mean, you can see how that's not in line with our values anymore. Because
which
we lost
part's
the connection. If we just try to make it as big as possible, like we rent Ullevi and we have free tickets for everyone. So we fill it 70,000 people. So we have a lot of people together, but that's no longer what we were looking for. We were looking for the connection. Right. So if we have money, how do we do that? How does money even relate to connection?
Well, you're describing, Miriam, you're describing live philosophy, but not necessarily live interactive philosophy.
Good.
It's those three parts that are really important. And sorry, Josh, I cut you off there.
Oh no, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think money does. Just relating to your last question there, Miriam. I think money does relate, but it depends on how it's used. So money can. Well, so look. Think about a simple relationship, well, maybe not simple, but a simple, context where you've got just two people, right? If you money is relevant in a number of ways. I mean, if you go out on a date, you're using money to facilitate a connection, right? You're using resources to facilitate connection. You don't have to go on an expensive date, right? You could just go for a walk, but at some point, money comes into the picture because when we use things, when we do things around in the world, right, we need money to be able to facilitate that. So it's the same thing with an organization.
Sort of washing our clothes before.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I think, there's a strange equivalency, especially in our time, of time and money, right? I mean, time is money. That sort of cliche we've heard all over, and I think that's an important piece of this. Is that what money resources would do for Life.Examined is it would free up the time necessary for the human actors to be able to engage. So I could imagine something like this: that we don't do Ullevi 30,000 people, but what we do is we have a stable group of philosophically trained people whose task is to focus on researching, preparing for the live interactive events, where then we come to these events, and that's where the engagement happens, because that's where the Socratic aspect of this happens. There have been so many events that we've had in the last couple of years where actually, no, I shouldn't say so many. I should say every single event we've had where I've left after the evenings more enlightened myself because of the nature of the interactive dialogue. And I think it's focusing on that, the Socratic aspect, requires that we have people who have the time to be able to prepare and to come to these events. As we know, there's about, if we take a scale of 100 of preparation, and for every Life.Examined event, I might prepare 100, and we maybe use 1% of that. And that's good, because that's the nature of the live interactive events. But to prepare 100 still requires a lot of time and energy. Yeah. And if we could use resources to free up people to prepare this broad swath of material and ideas and brainstorming, then when we get together, then it's easier to jump around and to follow the different threads that happen in the interactive element.
And the preparation that they do is back to the connection and the human aspect. The preparation that we do, and they and all of us, has to do with what is relevant for the people we're interacting with.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's very context specific. It's very specific to the context.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's very human and personal, and it's like this philosophy as a radical subjective experience.
Right, and this is what makes this thing so much different than when you go to a lecture. You have a lecturer who's prepared the material. You sit down, they present it. You receive it, you leave. Maybe you can ask some questions, there's some dialogue afterwards, but oftentimes the presenters just answer the questions they want in the way they want anyway. But I mean, the vulnerable aspect of this is when we enter an event, it can go anywhere. And that's super exciting to be a part of, because that's really philosophy as it plays out, I think, in the most authentic, genuine form, is we follow the train of thought wherever it goes. And that takes a ton of preparation to be able then to back off and let the thing grow organically.
So can I just see if I understand what you're saying here in terms of using the money, right? So the thought experiment that we're dealing with now is, what would Life.Examined do with $100 million? And where would we go with that? And one of the things you're saying, Matt, is that we could use that money to prepare. I mean,
right.
Well, for us, but also as we bring more people into the organization, it takes time, which is costly, right? It takes time to prepare for an event, not just the practical details like food and booking places and all that stuff, but also preparing the content. Mm-hmm. So content takes resources. It takes money. It takes money to prepare good content, because you have to be able to spend the time to do it. I mean, that's one way that the money is relevant.
Maybe a good metaphor and image for this is something like this: that what we do as organizers in Life.Examined is we set the stage. We put up the props. We set the stones and the houses and things there. We get the stage set, and then we ask people to come up on stage with us and improvise. And we begin to improvise in relation to the props and in relation to the stage we set. But then it develops in relation to that. But it still requires a good amount of time to set the stage. And that's really important for good improvisation. I mean, good improvisation always happens within boundaries. It's not entirely off and free. There's certain boundaries that we have to set up. And that requires time and energy. And that would require then resources. And ideally, it'd be great to have a whole army of philosophically minded people who are working behind the scenes to try and ensure that when people come to a Life.Examined event, the stage is set, and then we can play.
Good.
Yes?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Miriam.
Yeah. So I was thinking, when we said before, it's money will free the time to prepare content. Good. I'm thinking also that money will free the time to educate ourselves and other people, many other people, to hold space rather than for other people's content. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that we are able to the stage that we set is the philosophy bowl, where we invite people to come in with their stuff, with the stuff that engages them, their kids or their work or their whatever life situation they're in.
Right.
Yes.
And because that's what's interesting. That's what's philosophically interesting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And I want to be the best person to hold space for conversations like that, to be able to bring philosophy to whatever people are bringing. It's an airplane. I'm sorry. Or a helicopter.
A helicopter, I think.
Yeah, helicopter.
Continue.
Yeah.
You were in the flow, Miriam.
Yeah, so I was in Florida, and so was the helicopter.
Yeah.
But to be able to, I read this article that said something like, leadership is being able to stand in the unknown. And that is the kind of leader I want to be, and the kind of leader that I want the other Life.Examined collaborators to be. Yeah. To be able to stand in the unknown and to weave the philosophy, like the wisdom-seeking aspect of everything, to seek the wisdom in everything. Right. That's what I would do. If we had 100 million, I would make sure we get the best training to do that. Right. And I don't even know what that is, but it's something that has to do with like Socratic, deliberative conversations, listening skills, like active listening.
So that just sparked my mind thinking in this direction, or rather, we could start thinking in multiple directions, right? So if our vision is a world where people take it for granted that philosophical practice is essential for well-being, there's a lot of ways to impact that. In a way, it's impacting the way in which the general populace thinks about well-being. So one way of doing that is by holding events. And I mean, that's our core center. That's what we've done for quite a while. That's the core of what we do, live interactive philosophy. But there are a lot of things that could support it, such as books, articles, TV appearances, like all these other kind of things that might expand that. And we're trying to do that now with our YouTube channel, right? So there's different ways of expanding that, and there's different ways of expanding that would take resources to expand into. So something like printed material, books, courses, things that might be something that we could send into places. But also, just like what you said, Miriam, we might be able to become an institution that would train people to do exactly what you just said, to lead dialogical discussions in complex areas like interfaith dialogue or things like that are extremely difficult, especially in a place like Sweden. So we might be able to start training people to do that, which would spread the idea that philosophical practice is something even more.
Interesting. I mean, I like how the way you're describing it, because Miriam, you're bringing in an element that I wasn't thinking about, and that's what we're trying to do is empower people to be philosophical leaders of sorts. I mean, the idea of empowerment is we want to help people to be able to do philosophy for themselves and to then take it out into the rest of the world. And that idea of empowerment, I mean, that's a really important part of it, which incorporates this idea of leadership that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Philosophy as empowerment, as emancipation, from like ways of life that are not suited to you and not beneficial to you or your family or your workplace. These things, that's what we want to do, right? But if we can think bigger than paying for print material and stuff, what could we do with 100 million? Or we could.
Are we speaking about crowns here or dollars?
We're talking about we can say like 1,000 million or whatever. Like the whole point is
a lot of
no
money.
limit. There is always more money. We could I would like to rent a castle and have like a weekend workshop, and then the next week as well, and something like that. That would be wonderful.
I would like to see us. I mean, we've been talking about this idea of as developing your life exam. What we do is more interactive events where they are in fact more immersive. I would love to see us move in a direction of doing live, interactive, immersive philosophy, where you actually you come and you join us and you immerse yourselves in this philosophical practice. Something like a retreat. Because the problem with the events we do is we come, people are here for 3 hours or 2 hours, and we have these incredible conversations and dialogue, and people are super excited, and then we say, all right, we're done. See you next time. Go home, right? And what we're missing is the immersive element where people can stay and marinate in these ideas and work through them. And of course, we do that after the events. There's usually, we have people that stay for an hour and a half afterwards who want to continue the discussions and dialogue. But think if we could have Life Examined where we have an element of it that's immersive, and then we could have retreats and things like that where we could disappear to a castle, for example, and do
a train ride.
Or a train
Orient
ride.
Express, 3 weeks to Istanbul.
Something like that, right? Where you have an immersive philosophical encounter that incorporates all these elements.
But the question is, would there be a murder on the train?
No, there wouldn't. It's already been done.
It's already been done, okay.
Yeah. But I was thinking, the way I was imagining it was the philosophy of not being in one place, but like following the landscape and also seeing what emerges, immersing and emerging and all these other wonderful words.
The peripatetic aspect of philosophy and movement. We were in this on our last body.
Yeah.
Somatic aspect.
Somatic, peripatetic. Those are both really good. But I think the key thing that the way that money does that, right? So we could do one-off events, we could do a retreat, we could do things like that. But the way that thinking of it as an organization, right? What we would have to do is invest in structures. And invest in people. So we need to hire people. We need to hire an events coordinator. We need to hire somebody who is good at, admin, design, finance, right? Things that we're not.
Things that I'm terrible at.
But I think that's really essential, right? Like if we're going to have an organization that is able to, because we talked about sustainability earlier, and of course the thought experiment breaks down maybe at this point, because it can't just be an unlimited amount of money, because an organization has to function with money that comes in and goes out, and right. I mean, like it has to function,
And it's good it isn't an unlimited amount.
That's right.
Limited funds is kind of like death. It
Yep.
gives us a reason to live life better. And then same thing with an organization. Limited funds force you to really prioritize and to think seriously about how you use your money.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. So and the sustainability part is really essential. So organizing something like, I think this idea of like a train ride, philosophical train ride, is a brilliant idea. But in order to make it happen, we would have to, in order to make it happen, right, we would have to figure out all of the costs, how it would go together, how people would get there, how they would get back, all of those details, right? And that's a lot of work, which costs a lot of money. But if you can have it function and have a revenue, right? You have money that comes in that then pays for it to go on the next time. You can continually improve. You can make small improvements. So each year you get a better train ride, and it's organized better, and you have more interesting events and so on.
Yeah, and the thing is with the train ride, I mean, I love the idea of a train ride and trips, travels. I just want to do it now. But the point with philosophy as a way of life isn't to get away on a train ride all the time, but to bring it to where you are, where you are.
Right. It's not escapism.
Yes. That is welcomed. Sometimes it's like
it's needed. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Like a holiday is also needed, and the courses are needed to grow and everything. But what we want is to educate in such a way that our vision of philosophy as a way of life, that it is enhanced really, and not just for these when you go away.
Right.
We don't want to be we don't want to be we want to be like we always say in our events, that we want to be a place where the Homo philosophicus gene gets turned on, because we know from epigenetics that's how it happens to genes. They get turned on under certain conditions. Yeah. But then we want, when it's turned on, we want to also aid the way they start to flourish and grow.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, we talk about this as well in our events, that oftentimes we think about it in terms of a circle. We start at this place and we take this journey. And we come back to the point we started, but that's not exactly what we're doing. It's not a circle in that sense. It's more like a spiral, that we're starting at one point, and the idea is hopefully we're digging down and we're getting a bit more depth. We're ending up in the same place, but now with a bit more depth, right? Yeah. So when we return, when we go back to our jobs, when we go back to our parenting, when we go back to whatever it is we do, we've hopefully made this journey with the intention of then digging down a bit deeper. And
like another dimension.
Returning to the same place, but with a different kind of depth.
Well, that's the awakening and deepening philosophical ethos, and that's exactly what you just described, right? I mean, if you're able to do your parenting or your work out of a better understanding of why you're doing it, so you understand your values better, you understand how they hang together better, you're able to explain them better, right? I mean, that deepening, that going down one layer, that's the ethos that we're hopefully awakening and deepening. And one of the things that's interesting with that, in that we've seen in our events a lot, is that everybody has an ethos. Everybody has, they make choices. They do things in their lives for some reasons, but oftentimes they're unclear on what those reasons are, and so on. And I mean, we are too at times.
Somebody else's reasons.
Yeah, sometimes for other people's reasons. Yeah, sure.
Right.
Or like your parents' reasons or your culture's reasons, and you don't really believe in them or trust them or like them.
Sure.
And what an interesting exercise in helping one another get more clarity about that.
So
the money, the 100 million.
Yep.
How do we use it?
Yeah. So yes. How do we use it? Well, so I think the most practical, direct thing that let's imagine that we got a grant.
Yeah.
That's a good way to think of it. So let's say we got a grant that gave us, a large chunk of money, and we had to actually practically use it now.
And we had to say what we were going to use it for, because otherwise we wouldn't get the grant.
Good. That's good. Yeah, exactly. So what would be? So we've got these like core level values, these large visions that we've just talked about. But what are the and those are important. We can come back to those maybe in a little bit. But what is the what would you guys say is the practically next step you would do if we
Right.
had to write a grant proposal, or we got a grant and we could use that money immediately? What would be the next step?
I mean, if we could back up, we could ask the question: what are the necessary components required for us to be able to realize the vision that we have?
Good.
And I would say the necessary components are something you were in before, Josh, is that we need the human abilities to be able to support this. We don't right now. Life.Examined doesn't necessarily need a main office. It doesn't need a printing press. It doesn't need all these sort of things. I mean, it's quite fluid at this point. But what Life.Examined does need is good, qualified people who can organize, who can structure, who can take care of finances, who can do research and prepare and set the scene. And I would say, if I were going to ask for money for a grant, I would try to invest in the human power that would then be able to catapult Life.Examined to the next level.
Good.
Another thing that I would do is I would make sure we together in this sort of thinking out loud philosophical collective thing that we do, we would put together, we would make something like a method or a concept or something like a service that we can bring to people, you know.
Develop that.
Yeah, developing.
Yeah.
So set aside time to develop that. Like, use the money so that we can pay our rent and buy food while we are developing this.
I mean, it sounds like you guys are both saying quite similar things, right? That using that grant to put into human resources exactly to do those kind of things, to develop a course that we could offer to organizations, or to develop, this, right? And you want to develop that, but in order to do that, you need the time to be able to do it. You need money to be able to spend that time, and then we need to also bring other people in. We absolutely need a finance person. We need an administrator. We need an events. What do you call it? A project manager, basically.
People with a drive for wisdom.
Right.
Yeah, but we also need the practical.
Yes.
Wisdom and practical are connected, but we need, there's different parts. People have different skills, and some skills we don't have at all, and we need people to have those skills.
And here's something I think extremely important, actually absolutely necessary, that is really hard to sell when you're getting a grant, and it's really hard to sell if we are thinking uber practically minded. And that's what we were in on before, is that using resources to create a space, to give time and a space in which to explore. I mean, as we all know, good research requires a good amount of time, because you're inevitably going to follow a massive number of rabbit trails that don't seem to lead anywhere. Those may end up being really important in the end, but good research requires a good amount of time and the ability to brainstorm and to explore. And I think having a core value of Life.Examined should be built upon the idea of brainstorming and exploration. To build that into the structure, that's pretty crazy. But there's companies like 3M in Minnesota who have seen the value of this, of having groups of brainstormers on staff. Their whole job is to get together and to just come up with crazy ideas.
Several hours a week.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I think more organizations need that, and I think that should be a central pillar on which Life.Examined rests, is this idea of creating space for exploration. That's hard to sell to people when you're asking for money, because it sounds very all over the place. But I think that's such an important value, especially given what Life.Examined wants to do with interactive philosophy.
Yeah. So
imagine we could think of a method to brainstorm effectively, like, to use the word effective in a new novel philosophical ways, like not necessarily product oriented.
Right.
Yeah, but like depth and dimension oriented.
But now you see the challenge of what we're doing here is we're trying to redefine what we mean by productive, by effective. We're trying to redefine what we mean by philosophy. And this is sort of new to people, and that's why it's so important that we talk about these things.
So I think one thing that we've talked about a number of times before is that live interactive philosophy, and we want to take philosophy out of the university and bring it into daily life.
Not to kill it.
Absolutely. But I think there's an important thing here that reminds me. I had a discussion with a professor who is in the UK, and he talked about how the UK higher educational system is in a bit of a mess at the moment. One of the reasons why is because of this neoliberal idea that is in the UK that has come into the higher educational system, which means that everything is based on evidence-based measurements that show its effectiveness in terms of improving the economy.
Right.
And so the university is being strangled in a way, right? In terms of not allowing for there to be space to be creative with something that might go in any direction, because that's not evidence-based, a point system that shows you that you're improving the economy. And we want to do exactly that. And in a way, we want to take the some aspects of philosophy out of the university, not to kill the university, but to give exactly that kind of space for human flourishing, human development, not just economic development.
Right, to try and free philosophy from the tyranny of quantification.
Yeah, that's well said.
I mean, I remember when I was teaching. I mean, I remember that it was so important that we had to quantifiably show the value of our courses, and that always struck me as so wrong-headed in some sense, because it's very difficult to quantify the existential development of your students. But that's really, I think that's the important thing that we are trying to do, and that's something that's hard to sell in a world that is obsessed with quantification. But it's something that is so desperately needed in a world that is obsessed with quantification.
And the world is changing, and we're part of this change.
Yeah.
And also with philosophy, I mean, there's enough of philosophy to be both in university and outside. There's nothing will happen to philosophy if we take it out.
No.
I mean, there's enough to go around for everyone.
Yeah. No,
and hopefully the idea is that there will be a nice dialogue between the two. I mean, of course, we're all trained philosophers. I mean, we've all been through the academy, right? And the idea is hopefully that Life.Examined will be able to engage with people and train people to then be able to go into the academy as well, and to bring the insights of a more existential focused philosophy into what is oftentimes more less existentially focused.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I was just thinking, one other thing on that line, although we've gotten kind of away from talking about what we actually do with money. One other thing along that line is to think that oftentimes the educational system, as just talking about education, the educational system as a whole is in it's ripe for being disrupted, to put it in entrepreneurial terms, right? I mean, like it's a system that's been the same way for a very long time, and it is not attuned to the way that the current market is. So if we do want to talk about the economic side, right? People need a kind of training that actually prepares them for what they're going to be facing. And what they're not facing is a lifelong career in a particular area. What they're facing is changing their job every 2-3 years and doing something new, and doing something that has to be creative because more and more things are automated. And the university system is not addressing that. But that's, But now we're far away from talking about what we would actually do with money.
But we're not really far away. I mean, there's no such thing as off topic. If we end up in this space, that's important. That's because it's important to us, and we need to talk.
That's part of the core. But hey, actually, maybe this is a good way to wrap everything up. To go back to something we talked about at the very beginning, Matt, that you mentioned that oftentimes organizations, they just continue by inertia. Right. So if we get money into Life.Examined, we don't want it to just balloon us as a bureaucracy or as an organization that just sort of continues by inertia. We want it to do something effective with respect to our goals and our vision and our values. But I think the key thing about that is that the core values that drive us should be something that is bigger than Life.Examined. So if that is met, we should be happy for Life.Examined to die. So if people in general, if the world becomes a place where people take it for granted that philosophical practice is part of their well-being, then Life.Examined doesn't have an aim anymore, and it should die, and we should do something else, right? But so there's a value that
beautiful way to think of it. Yeah,
drives us more than just the organization itself.
Absolutely. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And we have an understanding of what it means to be of people and what it means to be a person as something that is, what's the word again? Anti-fragile, like a muscle that would actually die if it isn't used.
Yes.
You know? It will wither and die. So Life Examined will be this too. It's also
Beautiful.
anti-fragile. You know, we need to do something with it all the time. You know?
Yeah.
So that should be the new vision for Life Examined. Our vision is to work so hard that Life Examined is no longer necessary.
Nice. Yeah.
What will you do when Life Examined isn't necessary?
Well.
Matt or Josh?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful idea, though. I like that. That which I think should apply to all organizations and everything we do, because in the end, it's not about us. It's not about our sustenance. It's about the vision, about reaching others. When others are doing well, we're also doing well. So it's a collective communal effort as well.
Good. Is that a good place to tie us off, Miriam, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I'll see if I have some ending things that I want to. Oh, yeah, like the phrase "epimelia heautou" comes up. The care of the self, care, and the epimelia means care of, but also exercising or training. Again, the anti-fragile. So that for me personally, I'll just go back to myself now. For me personally, Life Examined is this. It's how I exercise and take care of myself. That's why I'm part of Life Examined.
Nice. Exercise your whole self.
My whole self, yeah. Don't point to your head. It's like the.
Well, no, I was pointing to the whole self.
Yeah.
The whole self in the limited frame of your screen.
Presence and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Although we haven't done any live interactive philosophy that includes like, push-ups or sit-ups. Not yet.
No, but they include the body.
They do include the body. We've talked about the body. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sort of like just the presence of the whole person body, the body energy, and everything. So that's always there in the live events.
But I think what you said, Miriam, is really good. That it might be easy to think that what we're doing in Life Examined is trying to fulfill a project that we're interested in. But I think Life Examined is interesting in that it's both self-oriented and other-oriented at the same time, and those two do not need to be kept separate, because as we've said over and over again, that as others develop, we develop as well. As we develop, others develop as well, and that's the nature of intercommunication, of the dialogical aspect of what we're doing. So it's a beautiful vision where everybody grows together through interactive, live, dialogical philosophy, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Together and emerge together,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I think that's our first video, right?
I think that's good.
All right, guys. Well, that sounds good. We can wrap it up there then. Thanks for today, you guys.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool.